John Wayne Gacy, a long YouTube-style true crime story inspired by real events, Chicago, Illinois. The late 1970s. A city of busy highways, quiet suburbs, and hard-working families chasing the American dream. On the surface, everything seemed normal. Children rode bicycles down tree-lined streets. Neighbors waved to each other while mowing lawns. Families gathered around dinner tables every evening. And in a modest suburban neighborhood, one man appeared to have it all. He was successful, friendly, respected, a businessman, a volunteer, a man who entertained children dressed as a clown. His name was John Wayne Gacy. To the people around him, he seemed like the last person who could ever be connected to evil. But sometimes the most terrifying monsters don't hide in darkness. Sometimes they hide behind smiles. And for years, one of America's most notorious serial killers managed to fool almost everyone. This is the story of John Wayne Gacy, the killer clown. Before America knew him as a monster, Gacy was simply another ambitious man trying to build a successful life. Born in Chicago in 1942, he grew up in a troubled household. People who later studied his life often pointed to his difficult childhood. His father was known to be harsh and abusive. Gacy constantly sought approval. He wanted respect. He wanted recognition. He wanted people to see him as successful. As he grew older, he learned how to wear different masks depending on who was watching. To co-workers, he could be charming. To neighbors, he could be friendly. To community members, he appeared helpful and dependable. He understood how to make people like him. And that skill would later become one of his most dangerous weapons. By the 1970s, Gacy seemed to be living the American dream. He owned a construction business. He employed local young men. He was active in community events. He attended social gatherings. People trusted him. Many even admired him. But beneath that respectable image, something far darker was growing. A secret life, a hidden world of manipulation and violence, and nobody around him had any idea. The first disappearances barely attracted attention. One teenage boy vanished, then another, then another. Families became worried. Friends became confused. Police opened investigations. But many missing teenagers were often assumed to be runaways during that era. Authorities didn't always connect the cases immediately, and Gacy understood this weakness. He knew how easily people could disappear without attracting widespread attention. He knew how to exploit trust. He knew how to manipulate appearances. Most importantly, he believed he was smarter than everyone else. For years, that belief seemed correct. Many of his victims were young men. Some were looking for work, others were students, some were simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. Gacy often approached them in a casual way. Sometimes he offered employment opportunities, sometimes he offered money, sometimes he offered friendship. His approach rarely appeared threatening. That was the point. Predators often succeed because they don't appear dangerous. They appear safe, comfortable, trustworthy. And Gacy had perfected that illusion. Friends and acquaintances often described him as outgoing and confident. He enjoyed being the center of attention. He loved telling stories. He loved making people laugh. He could walk into a room and quickly become the loudest voice there. People remembered him. People trusted him. People lowered their guard, and that made everything easier. One of the strangest aspects of Gacy's public image involved his clown performances. He occasionally dressed as Pogo the Clown or Patches the Clown for community events and charitable activities. Children laughed. Parents smiled. Photos captured him entertaining crowds. At the time, those images seemed harmless. Years later, they would become symbols of horror, not because there was anything inherently frightening about clowns, but because people realized the man behind the makeup was hiding unimaginable secrets. The contrast shocked America. A clown is supposed to bring joy. Gacy brought terror. As the years passed, more young men disappeared. Families searched desperately for answers. Posters appeared on walls. Phones rang with false leads. Parents waited by windows hoping their sons would return. Many never did. The uncertainty became a nightmare. Not knowing can sometimes be worse than knowing. Every passing day raised new questions. Every unanswered phone call deepened the pain. And somewhere in suburban Chicago, the person responsible continued living as if nothing. Investigators would later discover that Gacy had developed methods designed to gain control over victims. One of the most infamous involved a so-called handcuff trick. He would present it as a joke, a magic trick, something entertaining. People often didn't recognize the danger until it was too late. By then, escape became nearly impossible. The details revealed during investigations horrified experienced detectives. Many officers later admitted that some aspects of the case stayed with them for the rest of their lives. Because certain crimes leave permanent scars not only on victims and families, but also on those tasked with uncovering the truth. Meanwhile, Gacy continued building his public image. He attended parties, he managed business operations, he socialized with neighbors, he appeared normal. That word, normal, would later haunt many people connected to the case, because nobody wants to believe evil can look ordinary. Yet history repeatedly proves otherwise. Some of the most dangerous criminals in history successfully blended into everyday life. They looked like co-workers, neighbors, friends, community members. And Gacy was one of the most disturbing examples. For years, his suburban home concealed horrifying secrets. To passers-by, it looked ordinary. Nothing about it suggested the nightmare hidden within. Cars drove by every day, children played nearby, neighbors lived their lives. No one could imagine what investigators would eventually discover. The truth remained buried, literally and figuratively, but secrets rarely stay hidden forever. Eventually, mistakes happen. Evidence accumulates, patterns emerge, and when they do, even the most carefully constructed lies begin to collapse. The turning point arrived in December 1978. A 15-year-old named Robert Peist disappeared. Unlike some previous cases, investigators quickly began examining potential connections. Witnesses reported that the teenager had been seen speaking with Gacy shortly before vanishing. That detail immediately caught detectives' attention. At first, Gacy seemed unconcerned. He spoke confidently with investigators. He denied involvement. He appeared cooperative. But experienced detectives sensed something wasn't right. Small inconsistencies appeared. Timelines shifted. Certain explanations seemed unusual. Individually, none of those details proved guilt. Together, they raised serious questions, and detectives kept digging. As surveillance intensified, investigators learned more about Gacy's connections to missing young men. Names began overlapping, patterns emerged, witness statements pointed in similar directions. The list of concerns continued growing. What initially seemed like isolated disappearances now appeared potentially connected. And at the center of those connections stood one man, John Wayne Gacy. Police began monitoring him closely. Investigators followed him, observed his behavior, documented his movements. The pressure increased daily. For the first time in years, Gacy faced sustained scrutiny. The walls were slowly closing in. Whether he fully understood how close investigators were getting remains uncertain, but evidence suggests he recognized the danger. The confident mask occasionally slipped, stress became harder to hide, and detectives noticed. Eventually, authorities obtained search warrants. What they discovered shocked even seasoned investigators. Inside the house, they found items linked to missing individuals, personal belongings, suspicious evidence, objects that raised even more questions. But the most horrifying discovery had not yet been made. That revelation waited beneath the home, hidden in darkness, hidden for years, hidden beneath the feet of neighbors who had no idea what lay below. The crawl space, a cramped area beneath the house, dark, confined, uncomfortable. Investigators entered cautiously. Flashlights illuminated dirt and debris. Then someone noticed something unusual. A bone. Then another. Then another. The realization spread quickly through the search team. Human remains. The discovery transformed the investigation instantly. This was no longer a missing person case. It had become something far worse. As excavations continued, investigators uncovered evidence that stunned the nation. Body after body was discovered. The scale of the crimes became impossible to ignore. Reporters gathered outside, television crews arrived, headlines exploded across the country. Americans watched in disbelief. The respected businessman, the friendly neighbor, the community clown, the successful contractor. All those identities had concealed something monstrous. The search became one of the most significant criminal investigations in American history. Forensic specialists worked tirelessly. Detectives attempted to identify victims. Families waited anxiously for answers. Many finally learned the tragic fate of loved ones who had vanished years earlier. The grief was overwhelming. Yet for some families, knowing the truth brought a measure of closure after years of uncertainty. Even painful answers can be preferable to endless questions. As evidence mounted, Gacy's position became increasingly impossible to defend. Investigators assembled timelines, collected witness statements, analyzed physical evidence. Every new discovery strengthened the case. The mountain of evidence grew larger and larger. Eventually, it became overwhelming. The trial captured national attention. Courtrooms filled with reporters, spectators lined up for seats, television coverage expanded. America wanted answers. People wanted to understand how one man could hide such crimes for so long. Experts debated psychology. Journalists examined investigative failures. Communities reflected on warning signs that had been missed. Yet many questions remained difficult to answer. Sometimes evil resists simple explanations. Sometimes understanding remains incomplete. During legal proceedings, prosecutors presented extensive evidence documenting the scope of the crimes. The details were disturbing. Witnesses described encounters with Gacy. Investigators explained discoveries made during searches. Forensic experts presented findings. Piece by piece, the prosecution reconstructed years of criminal behavior. The picture that emerged was horrifying. Defense attorneys pursued various strategies. Legal arguments continued. Experts testified. Complex questions regarding mental health and criminal responsibility entered discussions. But regardless of legal debates, the evidence remained substantial. Public attention never faded. The case had become one of the most notorious criminal prosecutions in American history. When the verdict arrived, many observers felt it reflected the overwhelming evidence presented throughout the trial. For victims' families, however, no courtroom outcome could erase years of suffering. No verdict could restore lost lives. No sentence could fully heal the damage left behind. Justice can punish wrongdoing. It cannot reverse tragedy. Years later, the story of John Wayne Gacy continues to fascinate criminologists, investigators, historians, and true crime audiences. Part of that fascination comes from the scale of the crimes. Part comes from the investigation itself. But perhaps the most unsettling aspect is how ordinary Gacy appeared. He didn't resemble a movie villain. He didn't fit popular stereotypes. He looked like someone people might trust. And that reality forces society to confront an uncomfortable truth. Danger doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it smiles. Sometimes it shakes your hand. Sometimes it lives next door. The case also changed law enforcement practices in important ways. Missing person investigations evolved. Victim identification techniques improved. Awareness increased regarding serial offenders and behavioral patterns. Future investigators studied the case extensively. Lessons learned from failures and successes helped shape modern criminal investigations. In that sense, the tragedy contributed to important changes that continue influencing law enforcement today. For families affected by the crimes, however, the case was never merely history, it was personal. Every victim had dreams, friends, goals, families who loved them. True crime stories often focus on offenders, but the victims deserve remembrance as well. Their lives mattered. Their futures mattered, and understanding the full human cost remains essential. Today, decades after the investigation shocked America, the name John Wayne Gacy still evokes fear. Not because of clown makeup, not because of sensational headlines, but because the case demonstrated how effectively a predator can hide behind an ordinary appearance. It revealed how trust can be exploited, how communities can be deceived, and how difficult it can be to recognize danger when it wears a friendly face. The killer clown became one of the darkest figures in American criminal history, a symbol of deception, a symbol of hidden evil, and a reminder that sometimes the most terrifying monsters are the ones nobody suspects. As night falls across quiet neighborhoods and streetlights illuminate empty roads, the story remains a chilling warning from history. Not every monster looks like a monster. Sometimes the monster is the man everyone thought they knew. This version is written